Hello, I'm Doug Benedict, and welcome to the Butler Esports interview series, where we're interviewing sports leaders, owners, and industry experts on the evolving world of esports. Today's interview is with Eli McCarrel. Eli is the Director of Global Brand Partnerships with ESL. He attended the University of Oregon for journalism and has extensive experience in the world of brand marketing and advertisement with companies like Nike and Turner Sports. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. Don't forget the Pac-12. I was with the Pac-12 for a few years.
With the Pac-12 too, okay.
I got to tie it back into the college thing.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty relevant here.
Absolutely, understandable. So, getting on into all of it, how'd you get started professionally?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So I was kind of one of the fortunate ones. I knew pretty early on, not even in my career, but in my life, kind of what I wanted to do as a career. Athlete growing up, played a ton of sports, always playing a sport year round. And about halfway through high school, I realized that I wasn't going to do the college thing. I was going to try to pursue some sort of, Division I athletic dream. Not that I could have physically, maybe I could have, maybe I couldn't have, who knows. I was also very fortunate that I had an older brother who worked in sports media, who was a bit older than I was, in his mid to late 20s when I was in high school. So I got to see what he was doing. He worked for Sports Illustrated for Kids, worked for Fortune Magazine and a couple other publications, and really just loved what he did. So I kind of spent as much time kind of studying what he was doing and kind of learning. He took me under his wing too. He was a huge resource for me. Introduced me to some people at Sports Illustrated when he was there. And at the time, this was 2003, Sports Illustrated was launching a program called Sports Illustrated on Campus. And, at the time, ESPN had also launched their own magazine and started stealing some of that market share from Sports Illustrated. Sports Illustrated was becoming kind of your grandfather's magazine, and Sports Illustrated needed to become young, cool, and hip. So they launched this college ambassador program. I was 18 at the time, and fortunately for me, I was able to launch a kind of a student ambassador program at the University of Oregon as a freshman. So my job was to just basically peddle these magazines. They were college lifestyle magazines that had a kind of a sports angle. I could think of what's Matt Leinert's dorm room looked like, that kind of stuff. And did that for 4 years. After my junior year, I was awarded an internship in New York City with Sports Illustrated, the brand, working on their marketing team in the Big Apple. So, I went from this small town in Oregon to New York City as a 21-year-old and realized that the world is pretty big out there. So kind of took that as an opportunity to just start networking, meet as many people as I could. So I went back to school. I was there for a summer, went back to school in Eugene, wrapped up school, and about, actually a little earlier than this, probably about February, March, started looking for my kind of post-grad job, applying, interviewing, networking, taking meetings, coffees, doing all this stuff out of a fraternity house in Eugene, Oregon, and was fortunate enough to land an internship after I graduated at the Nike World Headquarters up in Beaverton, working on global brand basketball initiatives. So it was kind of a dream job right out of college, but the flip side of that, it was an internship. So I was there for 3 months. I was very fortunate to get extended for, I think, about another 6 months. So I was there for about 9 months overall, working with the global brand basketball team, with the consumer insights team. Met some just incredibly talented people. Glenn Chin, who's my boss, who I still keep in touch with. Jabari Hearn is a guy who I worked with. He was my kind of day-to-day supervisor. Jeff Chaw, just guys that have gone on to do awesome things. So once that wrapped up, that was about January, February of 2008. I had that kind of itch to move back to New York City. So I had taken all the contacts I had met the summer before in New York, everyone who I had met at Nike. I tapped into my brother who had some contacts, and kind of just moved to New York. I moved in with a friend, slept on a couch for a couple of weeks, and just grinded and pounded the pavement. You read stories about people that moved to New York with a backpack full of resumes, and I was kind of that kid. And I remember it was a Friday. I had interviewed, I think, with 6 or 7 people that day, and it was coffees and interviews and things like that. And Friday at 5 p.m., I remember I somehow randomly got connected with an HR person at Turner Sports. it was the last interview of the day. Wearing a wrinkly suit that was 2 sizes too big. And I had like a little portfolio and a couple resumes. And I had my tools, my toolkit. And yeah, I did that interview, left, didn't think, I followed up, did the routine thing. Didn't think much of it though. I didn't really know anyone at Turner Sports, but I kind of was persistent about it, kept following up with them. And fortunately my resume got put in the right hands. And I ended up about 2 months later moving to New York City from Oregon, and got a job, an entry-level job with Turner Sports as a sales assistant, overseeing all television sports programming for TNT and TBS. And while I was there for about 7 years. It was a pretty wild time in the history of Turner Sports to be there. I was there from 2008 to 2014, and in that time, 2010, Turner acquired the rights to March Madness. In 2012, they acquired Bleacher Report, the website and TeamStream app, and that was just a behemoth at the time. So I was able to work on some pretty awesome projects when I was there. Ended up being on the sales side for about 5 years, and then on the marketing, the kind of sponsorship side for about 2 years. And then about 2014, I hit that crossroads. I think we all do when we're about 30. It's like, what do we get? The kids, the house, the wife, all that stuff kind of happened at once. All my family being in Oregon, I decided to look for jobs back on the West Coast. Fortunately, I was able to get a job at the Pac-12 doing very similar things that I was doing at Turner, overseeing TV, digital sponsorship for the Pac-12 conference and Pac-12 networks, which was a great experience. Met some awesome people. And while I was there, I got a kind of an introduction into esports. Pac-12 was working on an esports initiative in 2016. And that's actually kind of what serendipitously brought me back to New York. So while I was there at the Pac-12, we were working very closely with ESL to develop this college esports program. And I got reconnected with a gentleman who I worked with at Turner, who was then at ESL, Paul Brewer, who's now my boss, who I'd worked with at Turner. And yeah, about 2 years later, when my job at the Pac-12, when I was ready for a new challenge, I reached out to Paul to see what opportunities there were back in New York. At that point, I was kind of open for whatever, location-wise, not job-wise. And he said, there's this opportunity, and I ran through the gamut of interviews with their leadership team, and I moved wife and 2 kids back to New York. So here I am.
Here you are. Well, it sounds like you have run the gauntlet. Like you said, you've been all over.
Yeah.
A lot of huge household names. So what are, 1 or 2 of your favorite projects you've gotten to work on in your career so far?
Yeah, that's a good question. As I said, at Turner, I was there for some pretty monumental milestones in the life of Turner Broadcasting, Turner Sports. I think working initially on the March Madness tournament was pretty eye-opening. Not only that we were working with CBS, which was a new dynamic for us, but I was young at the time. I was like 26, 27, something like that. So they put us in the command center at the CBS studios. And so we were there like logging commercials and making sure that, we were watching all 4 games, because at the time it was TNT, TBS, True TV, CBS, all 4 games at once. And me and a couple of my buddies that I was working with, we were just sitting there logging commercials and making sure everything was running correctly. And those are some of the best times that, we had, because it was a Friday at 11 o'clock at night, and craft services just brought in food for us. And we were like, poor 20-somethings in New York City, watching 4 basketball games at once. It was like the best thing ever. So that's one that sticks out for me. And then more recently, I'd say my first kind of eye-opening experience at ESL was when I went to our Katowice event in Poland. It's kind of, I guess you'd say, our Super Bowl at ESL. It's a Counter-Strike tournament that we do in this small town in the middle of Poland. You kind of got to take planes, trains, and automobiles to get there. But it is the biggest event we do. We draw about 175,000 people there on a normal year, not this year because we pivoted to a no audience. But seeing that in real life was kind of that slap in the face after I joined ESL. Like, holy smokes, this is legit. This is what it's all about.
Yeah, absolutely. So ESL, you kind of took us on your journey, how you've gotten there. What is, the mission of ESL? What do you all hope to, lofty goal, if you haven't already achieved it, because you've done some amazing things already,
Yeah.
what is that mission?
Yeah. I mean, I guess you could, not to be too cliche, but go back to our mission statement is we create a world where everybody can be somebody. We don't just focus on the tier one kind of top of the pyramid pro players. We actually start from the bottom, and we try to build these open ecosystems where anybody can play, where you and I could start our esports career tomorrow, whether that's through programs like ESL Collegiate, the ESL Mobile Open. We've got ESEA, which is a big Counter-Strike community where anybody can join. I actually joined the other day, to do a little homework, not to play, of course. Leave work at work. But we have all these opportunities, and we also have developed a pathway to pro. So, as you join these programs, there is ways to develop your career and go up the pyramid. And we do have these kind of 0 to hero stories that we like to tell and like to share. Specifically within ESEA, for example, we've had some professional players come out of that program, and it's something we really like to hold our hat on.
Yeah. So your role specifically, global brand partnerships, what do you do? Like, how does that fit into this crazy world of esports? What is your focus?
Yeah. I guess at the core, we're a business, right? So we have to generate revenue, and we have multiple ways that we do that, whether it's through media rights for our events, ticket sales, merchandise, things like that. But then also sponsorships. So brand partnerships is kind of a glorified way of saying sponsorships. We don't like to look at them as sponsorships, place logo here. It's a little bit more of how can we create equitable value for each other, but also our fans. I think that's important. So my job is to oversee that side of our business. So, event sponsorships, media sales, advertising, and primarily for me, because I am coming from kind of the traditional sports landscape, is my kind of mission is to really go after non-endemic sponsors, brands that are used to activating in traditional sports, and try to break down that language barrier between traditional sports and esports. Because I think that's part of the reason I was hired, is they identified me as someone who can help bridge that gap. So my job is to bring on new business, to bring in partners and nurture partners, and try to keep them and grow them at ESL.
So you kind of hinted at it earlier, and this kind of goes into it as well. But the situation we're in with COVID-19 right now, how has that affected you and your role, but also ESL as a whole? You said, audienceless event earlier.
Yeah, I mean, we'll start with ESL. I mean, fortunately and unfortunately, we've obviously been affected. Everybody's been affected. I would say, unfortunately, we're obviously unable to hold our in-arena events that we're so used to, that all of our fans are so used to. We're one of the premier event tournament organizers in esports. So not having that is, it hurts us, not only from a sponsorship standpoint, but even with our fans. Like, it hurts us to not be able to deliver that to our fans. I'd say from a positive angle, all of our broadcasts, all of our tournaments have always been broadcast. So we still have that. We've been forced to innovate a little bit. We've been doing remote broadcasts where we have talent and analysts doing remote broadcasts, either from their home or from a remote studio. And we've been kind of pushed to innovate with streamlined workflows and things like that. I would say that the positive to that is because everyone's, or a lot of people are at stay at home or have stay at home orders, our viewership's been up. So the silver lining there is, although we haven't been able to deliver these events, our viewerships have been through the roof. So that's something that we're kind of looking at quarter by quarter at this point. I would say that for ESL, our primary business obviously is putting on these tournaments. Part of my oversight is also brand partnerships for DreamHack festivals in North America. So DreamHack festivals, it's like they call it the Coachella of gaming. I don't call it that. Other people call it that because I don't want to nickname our own festivals the Coachella. It's pretty ambitious, but it's like a music festival meets esports festival, esports tournament. We have multiple esports happening. We've got a BYOC area where people bring their own computers. We do them all across North America, all over the world. Those have actually been halted pretty much just because the environment is it's a festival, right? So it's 30,000 people in one room at one time, which can't happen. So we've postponed all those basically through the end of summer. We're still evaluating the rest of the year. But all of our ESL events, ESL tournaments, for the most part are happening. They're just happening online.
And like you said, this is a time that esports, not that they want to take advantage, but where we stick out is you can continue these broadcasts and, continue being a part of people's lives. So I guess that brings us to the next question of, esports, it's new, it's evolving. I say it at the beginning of every, episode we film of this, but how does it legitimize itself to a general populace or a general, work populace in the form of a corporation or organization, as well as the form of just entertainment? Because for many people who aren't involved, like you said earlier, it's a different language. They don't know how to traverse it, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't think legitimate's the right word. I mean, esports is legitimate, right? We're here. We've been doing it for 20 years. I think we're past the phase of is esports here to stay, because it's here, it's happening. This is a weird time for everybody. A lot of what you're seeing out there isn't really esports. It's a lot of entertainment focused programming. It's NBA athletes playing against, celebrities and things like that. But it's not, by definition, some of it's not technically esports. I think esports in general is a bit generational in my eyes. And it's viewed no different than NHL, NFL, which, skew older. Esports just skews younger. I think, and we can talk about this like 5-10 years from now, esports is going to be a lot more of a mainstay. You look at, not to go back to the NBA, but you look at the players right now that are not playing basketball, they're playing Call of Duty and whatever else. These are all 20, 21-year-old players. It's not necessarily D Wade and LeBron playing against each other. It's all the young guys playing against each other. So that it's a generational thing that I think we're going to see mature in the next 5-10 years. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know exactly what that looks like, but I do know that it is a generational thing. And you ask any 14-year-old who their favorite streamer is, they can answer it in 2 seconds. You ask any 40-year-old who their favorite streamer is, they won't know the answer to that. So it's just one of those things.
Absolutely. That's a great point. As someone who has entered the field from a non-esports originating background, as most people probably do now, since it's so new, everyone's coming from different places to help prop this profession up. When you jumped in, you said you had talked to people. What advice were you given getting into this, new area?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I was given a lot of advice. I was also very fortunate. So I came from the Pac-12, which was a 100-year-old company, 100-year-old conference. Networks were obviously a lot younger, but it's iconic, historic business, right? It's been around forever. Esports, totally new. However, ESL's been around for a while. So I was able to come into a situation where I had guys like Craig Levine, Paul Brewer, Yvette, who's our CEO of North America, Mark Cohen, all these people at my fingertips that I could just pick their brain at any time. I mean, they sat next to me or they were a phone call away. So I was very fortunate. One of the things I learned early on was just to be a sponge. No different than, any other job I've had. The more you can absorb, the more you can learn, the more you can read, the better off you're going to be, the more value you're going to add. And selfishly, the more, essential you're going to be, to use common terms or current terms, because, the more you can dig your heels into any company you're with and really get into the fabric of the company, the harder it is for them to lose you. So that's one thing I've learned, at any job, but esports, especially be a sponge. I've made this comparison in the past. It's like coming into a job and without having any knowledge of the NFL, NBA, NHL, MLS, MLB, rugby, being forced to learn it all at once. That's what I had to do with Dota, League of Legends, Counter-Strike, Overwatch, everything. There's a dozen, 2 dozen more that I had played maybe once or twice, but I didn't know what the objective of the game was. I didn't know what how the communities were different between all of them, because they are all pretty much different. There is some overlap, but they're all very unique communities. So that was something I have to learn. I'm still learning. I'm learning every day.
Absolutely. And in your role as well, you talked about this, obviously everyone's got to make revenue and whatnot, but specifically with esports, and again, specifically with your role, where do you see those highest revenue opportunities? You talked about endemic and non-endemic, partnerships, as you were saying, like,
yeah.
Is your focus, and maybe this is the wrong question, but is your focus on those companies that are not traditionally in this area, or are you really like trying to, batten down your hatches with the companies that are used to this?
Yeah, I'd say the focus is on both. It always has been. It always will be. Non-endemic partners, as everyone calls them, they add a ton of value to esports. Endemic, not non-endemic, endemic. I'm wearing, a gaming headset. I've got a SteelSeries keyboard. I mean, endemic companies are always going to have a place in esports. They're always going to provide value. In terms of upside, I think it's pretty easy and safe to say that non-endemic brands and whatnot, provide a ton of potential value to the esports ecosystem. And the ecosystem has a ton of value for non-endemic brands. I think, there are so many big audiences across every title in esports, and I think there is a very unique opportunity to connect with those people through tournaments, through teams, through content, things like that. And non-endemics, I think that's where we'll see the most growth in the next few years, and that's part of the big reason that I'm here.
Yeah. So ESL, we've talked about it multiple times. You put on these massive events, massive tournaments. What have you gotten right as ESL, in your opinion, about competition in esports? Professional competition in esports, or any competition in esports.
Yeah, I think we've, with a lot of our fans, a lot of the communities we work with and provide content for, I think our ability to operationalize the events, we do so many events every year. We've been doing it for a long time. We've been able to streamline a ton of workflows that way. So we've turned it into a little bit of a science, the way we put these events on. I'd say that's one of the things we've gotten right. Obviously there's things we can work on, but I'd say that's one of the things that we do almost, if not better than anybody. I think the way we treat our players is second to none. A lot of the feedback that we get from the teams and players that we work with is incredible. I think that goes back to our mission of building a world where everybody can be somebody. I think the fact that we provide so much opportunity to so many people at so many levels is a reason that ESL is so highly regarded in esports.
Absolutely. And you talk about this, treating your players so well. ESL's, responsibilities in gaming, kind of like, I don't know how to word it, your model, or not your motto, but your pillar, I guess I would say, kind of like with any key, that all seems centered around it. That seems so unique to what you all do. Can you kind of like expand on that? Any key specifically, or, other responsibilities in gaming projects, I guess?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good question. I'm glad you brought it up. I mean, social responsibility is obviously hugely important for us. For most every organization, it is. We're in a very unique position that, because we've been around for so long, we've been able to identify a lot of trends. What are some blind spots in esports and gaming? What are the areas we can focus on? I think strategically, one of the things that we've done pretty well in the past few years, I think it was 2015, we developed a partnership with AnyKey, which is a diversity and inclusion organization dedicated to eliminating the toxicity in gaming and esports. I think early on, 2015, 2016, 17, was really focused on research and creating content panels and distributing that pretty much for free to anybody who needed it. I think at one point, we even, from a college standpoint, we even developed one about what are the top 10 things you should do if you're developing a college esports program. These are the things you should focus on from a D&I standpoint. I think most recently, the biggest wins in that regard, and what's kind of piped us into the mainstream, is our Good Luck Have Fun pledge. I think just recently we topped over 500,000 people that have signed up for it. It's an online code of conduct. You basically go on Google AnyKey GLHF pledge. It's a code of conduct. You sign up for it. You get a Twitch badge that you can put on your chat icon. And to be honest, the code of conduct is pretty straightforward. It's, if you see something, say something, be respectful of others, think before you act. It's pretty much basic human decency stuff. But you'd be surprised some of the toxicity that's out there. And I think AnyKey does a great job of spreading awareness around this. Obviously, with 500,000 people signing up, our goal is to reach 1 million by the end of the year. I think it's super important. I think as we think about the next wave of AnyKey and what the opportunities are to take it to the next level, I think is from a brand standpoint. I think most recently we actually brought on a brand partner with AnyKey. Air Force, one of their huge initiatives is diversity in the military. And, with Air Force and AnyKey and ESL, we're creating content. We're including them in some of the trade show appearances that we were doing. We're not doing them in right now, but we're weaving them into that story, and how can we align a brand who shares the same message and the same mission? How can we weave them into that content and tell a really impactful story?
That's awesome. I think that, we talk about this being new, and, we think about all the ways it could go, the idea of, focusing on looking for blind spots, I guess, and being able to identify those with, the data you have, because like you said, you've been around so long. Extremely important, extremely interesting. So, moving back to our area here at Butler, ESL and the Big East partnered for a long time now. ESL, how do you see yourselves, I guess, continually moving forward or expanding in that competitive market? Is it, are you focusing more on the professional players? Is the new great thing college? Or are you looking at high school, or, what have you?
Yeah, I think, we've got a very, very good strategic team in-house led by Craig Levine, who's really trying to identify, not only what we're not trying to be opportunistic. Ooh, college esports is the next big thing. Let's figure out a way to, get in there. It's how can we not only keep our finger on the pulse of what's happening in esports across the entire ecosystem, the entire pyramid of where the competition's happening, but it's also where can ESL come in and add value. We saw, an opportunity with the Big East and some of our other collegiate partners to come in and help stabilize and build an infrastructure for competitive gaming on campus. And I think that's what we're doing, what we're working on. I think we've got a pretty smart approach by taking this kind of crawl, walk, run approach, where we're focusing on kind of one title, one conference, and then growing it that way, kind of organically. And that's what I see as the future. I think, adding more conferences, adding more games into our kind of competitive ecosystem is what I see as the short-term future. What the long-term future of college esports is, if you and I can figure that out, let's talk offline and get an LLC or something and do it right. But that's the $1 million question, is what does college esports look like 10, 20 years from now? Who knows? What does college football look like 10, 20 years from now? No one knows. So I think that's kind of the long-term view that no one really knows right now. I think in the short term, it's a matter of, how can we build infrastructure? And a lot of it's just working with, universities and conferences to understand what the needs are and try to deliver those.
Absolutely. Perfectly segues into my next question. 3 to 5 years, let's not talk about the super long-term view, but, the short future view. What do you think we're looking at? Esports, what's the landscape? How do you think, I guess, the world will view esports comparatively to traditional sports in this, next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think a lot of it depends on, what titles are relevant. I think one of the big challenges that esports has faced is, a lot of the titles aren't really, for everybody, right? Games like Counter-Strike, Dota, Overwatch, Call of Duty, it's no different than traditional sports. They have their audiences, and you got to be able to find those audiences. I think one of the benchmarks that people say, oh, is esports legit, or is esports, mainstream, is if it's on television. Like, that's not where you're going to find a majority of the best esports that are out there. So, I don't think that there is any sort of watermark for, what is, legit or whatever. I think that we'll continue to grow organically, but 3 to 5 years from now, again, if we know what titles, if we know what the Fortnite of 2017 or 18 is going to be for 2022. Let's go figure it out and hire some developers and get after it.
Absolutely. That, like you said, $1 million question. That's why we're here. It's what we're trying to learn, right?
Yeah.
So, you've given us tons of great information, given us kind of your journey for people who go to Butler or people anywhere in college or in high school getting ready to graduate. What's your advice to them, getting into not only the esports industry, if that's what they want to go to, but the sports industry as well?
Yeah. I think one of the biggest things I've learned, and I don't even think this is something that I was taught, it's you gotta be uncomfortable. Networking in a traditional sense is uncomfortable. It's putting yourself out there. It's reaching out to people that don't know who you are. It's asking for their time. I think that's one of the big things that, you got to get over pretty quickly is be uncomfortable. I think for esports specifically, if I'm talking to a 22-year-old or a 26-year-old that's coming out of grad school or undergrad, your Call of Duty stats aren't going to impress us. But your desire to understand the industry and the space we're in, the trends we're seeing, things like that. I work with the University of Oregon, have been for a lot of years, just all their graduate programs and even their undergrads. And some of the students that come out of there are just awesome. And they're sending me articles that are super interesting. They're sending me projects that they've done in class. That's the kind of stuff that makes me say, hey, I want to hire this kid. This person's got their head on straight. They're doing the right things, and they're going to add value. I think there's a lot of people that are graduating that say, hey, I love playing League of Legends in my dorm room. I want to work in esports. Yeah, that's not necessarily going to get you a job at ESL. But yeah, and for everyone watching, however many people from wherever, reach out to me on LinkedIn. Happy to take time to talk to anybody. I've always really believed in paying it forward. I got it at a young age, and I will never be able to give back as much as I have been given, sitting in the seat that I'm in, but whatever I can do to help any, students from Butler or anywhere else, happy to do that.
Well, absolutely. Thank you so much for that. And the last question we have that we ask everybody, because we want to continue this for as long as possible, and we may run out of ideas, so we probe everybody for their ideas. Who are two other industry leaders that you think would be great people to bring on this little podcast, little interview series we're doing, to give us an interesting insight onto the world of esports or esports adjacent that is affecting each other?
That's a tough question. Put me on the spot. Two people. Okay. So, and I think this is relevant here because we're talking college, we're talking esports. There are two people I worked with at the Pac-12. One of them's still there. One of them has gone off to another company or another conference. Respected them, admired them. They also have very unique POVs on esports. One of them's Jamie Zaninovich at the Pac-12, deputy commissioner. Really, really great guy. Again, look up to him a lot. He's super sharp, super smart, also a believer in esports. I'd be super interested to listen to 30 minutes of him talking about everything college and everything athletics and everything esports. And then Gloria Navarez, who's at the West Coast Conference, worked with her a little bit at the Pac-12. She also has a very unique POV on esports. Also really sharp, really smart, and really awesome person to talk to. I'd say Jamie and Gloria would be two excellent people to have on the podcast.
Fantastic. Thank you for the suggestions. That's a wrap on all the questions that we have for you. Eli, thank you for being here, Director of Global Partnerships at ESL Gaming. I want to say, stay safe, stay healthy, and all that good stuff. And, enjoy the time you have, stuck in your house with your kids and all that stuff.
Yeah, you too. Thank you, Doug. Thank you for having me. Thank you, everybody. We'll talk soon. We'll see you on the next one.
See ya.